Well, I got to hear a live performance of a piece called Old American Songs by Aaron Copland. Now, some of you know that Aaron Copland was a 20th century American composer, and in this piece he put together a collection of distinctly American folk songs and hymns, and he set it to be sung by a male voice and accompanied by an orchestra. I remember that performance as if it were yesterday because of this one thing. I was absolutely amazed, awestruck at the powerful voice of that fine baritone soloist who belted the songs over the accompaniment of an entire orchestra, almost seemingly without effort. The human voice is quite amazing. As a child, I could tell from the tone of my father's voice whether there was a frown on his face or a smile. On those summer days when the entire neighborhood was our playground, when it was time for dinner, and my mother stepped out the back door and called us home, we could hear her no matter where we were, even though we always tried to get a few more minutes of play by claiming that we didn't hear her. We always heard her. In this morning's lesson, the voice takes center stage. In the powerful and poetic psalm that we sang, the voice of the Lord thunders over the waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful and splendorous. The voice of the Lord breaks the trees and shakes the wilderness and strips the forests bare. The voice of the Lord bursts forth in flashes of lightning, although frankly I would have expected voices of thunder. The point of the whole thing is that when we sing this psalm, when we hear the voice of the Lord over all of creation, we have no doubt about who's in charge. The Lord rules over all creation. In the gospel lesson, it's that voice that returns at Jesus' baptism, only this time the voice of power and majesty is a voice of tenderness and love. The voice of the Father at Jesus' baptism acclaimed Jesus as the Son of God. Though gentle, the voice carries authority as the Father commissions Jesus and sends the Son out for ministry. We're going to be reading stories out of Matthew's Gospel for the next year, and every story in Matthew's Gospel is a story about God, even though God is often hiding in the background. But only here and at the Transfiguration, only twice in the whole Gospels does God come to the foreground and reveal God's self through an audible voice. And here is the powerful voice that the psalmist described. Only now, of course, it does not speak through the tumults of creation, but through a voice that even the bystanders could hear. And how that voice preaches. This is my Son, my beloved. It's an authoritative pronouncement of the heavenly seal of divine approval, both for who Jesus is and for what Jesus is about to do. Jesus is the one whom God called. Jesus is the one who God has taken by the hand and kept. Jesus is the one who is given as a covenant sign to the people, a light to the nations. This is the single most important thing that Matthew's gospel wants to say about Jesus. That Jesus is God's own Son. As the story goes on through Matthew's gospel, the truth will be verified over and over again. It will be verified when he goes to his hometown synagogue and there takes the prophet Isaiah scroll down off the shelf. And he reads about he is now the servant of Isaiah who has promised to bring sight to the blind, the gift of walking to the lame, lifting up the downhearted and setting the captives free. His mission will be verified when he turns water into wine, when he raises the dead, when he parades into Jerusalem to the applause of the crowd and the waving of the palm branches. And it will be most powerfully verified in the darkness of Good Friday. Though Isaiah suggests that this servant of God will not cry out or lift up his voice, that's exactly what he does as he hangs on the cross, crying out in abandonment, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He cries into the dark, and God's voice is strangely, eerily, distressingly silent. And though Jesus will take a crooked road from this wilderness moment at the Jordan River to a hill far away, there is a direct connection from his baptism to his crucifixion. You see, at his baptism, this is the work here that he was commissioned for. The calling of his baptism will be fulfilled in his death. And though he would enter death alone for our sakes, he would come out of the tomb alive, not only to rescue us from death, but to give us life that lasts forever. Dear church, that's the gift of following Jesus. Baptized into his death and resurrection, we're given life now, forever. When we are baptized into Jesus' death and resurrection, we begin a life that even comes to its fulfillment in our death. And the gift of baptism is no mere individual gift. We're baptized into a community that is now the physical body of Christ in the world. And as the body of Christ, we are called to continue that work that Jesus began, the work of bringing in God's kingdom, of proclaiming good news, offering healing and release, standing with and welcoming the stranger, offering food to the hungry and a cool drink to the thirsty. And to do this work, we too are given a voice. Just like Peter, who in that reading from Acts proclaimed the radical inclusion of what God was doing in Jesus, bringing Gentile and Jew together in the same family of love and grace. So we also proclaim far and near, to friend and strangers, to our neighbors nearby and our neighbors around the world, all that God intends for us and for all creation. It's all fulfilled in Jesus. So go. Tell the good news. Make disciples. Preach. Testify. Speak with words and speak with action. Go. Hearts and hands and voices raised in praise of the one who has brought us life.